So coming up this weekend is the final card of 2023, and it's a really good one. It's a pay-per-view card, UFC 296, Edwards versus Covington, and I cannot wait. I think this card is stacked from top all the way down to the bottom. The prelims are gonna be great. The main card is going to be great. The press conference is gonna be great. I'm just all in all looking forward to this card. We've got two title fights, two great title fights as well. That Pantoja versus Royval fight of the night got written all over that one. And then you've got Edwards versus Covington in the main event, a pretty highly anticipated matchup. And it'll be interesting to see what does happen in that fight. But before we do get into my predictions for every single fight on the card, I do have a couple of sponsorships and affiliations to shout out. The first one is We Want Picks. If you do sign up to the We Want Picks premium membership and you use my code ARTEM, you will get a 3-day free trial and you can cancel at any time. Now would be a great time to sign up to that because you could utilize all of these tools and all of this information here that you get with the premium membership for the 3 days during the week leading up to UFC 296. And it's $10 per month after that if you do enjoy it. Otherwise, you can cancel at any time. And then as well as that, you do have my 125% sign up bonus. If you do sign up to BetUS, 125% sign up bonus there with your deposit, as well as a 100% sign up bonus to Bet Online. And with all of that intro out of the way, let's get into the opening fight. Randy Brown versus Muslim Salikhov. And although the odds for this one are relatively wide, I think that this is a fight that a lot of people might be on the underdog in Muslim Salikhov. Now, I'm not. I am on Randy Brown, but it's a very, very low confidence pick because I think stylistically Muslim Salikhov probably could give Randy Brown quite a bit of problems in this matchup. Now, I understand that Muslim Salikhov is almost 40 years old and he just, to be honest, isn't really looking like the same guy that he was a couple of years ago when he was taking on some good guys. Like that win over Alessio Zaleski is a pretty solid win, has aged pretty well now that he just had that great fight against Renat Fakrinidov. But that was 3 years ago, and Salikhov was 36 years old. Now he's 39, almost 40, not coming off a very good performance against Nicholas Dalby, who isn't a bad fighter to lose against whatsoever, because Dalby just went on to beat Bonfim. But I think that Randy Brown should be able to get this one done. Now, Randy Brown isn't the youngest guy in his own right, but he's much closer to his prime, and you could say that he is in his prime, because he is a guy that has been either at the very bottom of the rankings, or borderline ranked for a very long time. In fact, for probably the majority of his career in the last couple of years. He is coming off a win over Wellington Turman, which, to be honest, I don't think he looked that impressive in because Wellington Turman was coming down a weight class to 170, and Turman was having a lot more success on the feet than I expected. I think he had a lot more success on the feet than a lot of people expected, but Brown was able to edge that one out in a close fight. He lost to Jack Della Maddalena, but at that time, Jack Della Maddalena is and was on a massive run. And he did lose to that matchup there. He did get submitted after getting dropped pretty badly. But he bounced back with a win. And before that, he was beating some decent guys. Got a close win over Chaos Williams, a dangerous striker. And also a win over Francisco Trinaldo, who is quite old himself. At the end of the day, Muslim Salikhov is a pretty solid striker. He's a good kickboxer. Very athletic, even at his age of 39 years old. He does have that Kung Fu background, of course. But I think that Randy Brown should be able to use that really long reach that he does have and just throw out the jab out there and just kind of win from range in a very close, competitive decision that I do believe Randy Brown can edge out. But this is a very low confidence pick to start off the night. I think it's something to avoid. If it does kind of add to anything, I do think that the fight does go the distance. I think that if any one of these guys are going to win the fight, it's probably not going to be by finish. So the pick is Brown by decision in this matchup here. But this is a fight here which I'm actually expecting to end inside the distance. It's Shamil Gaziev taking on Martin Buday. And Shamil Gaziev is going to be making his UFC debut against a ranked opponent, because I believe Martin Buday is ranked either 14th or 15th right now in the UFC heavyweight rankings. And Gaziev is pretty fresh off a very good Dana White's Contender Series win. But prior to that, he was putting in some really good work over at Brave. He beat Darko Stosic, who's having a lot of success in the KSW, a former UFC fighter himself. Before that, he was beating some decent guys. Took down Karol Kornilov there in a big-time undefeated versus undefeated matchup. I think that Shamil Gaziev is the real deal, but there is definitely a few things to watch out for. in this fight and also in future fights. Shamil Gaziev is a wrestler with unreal power on the feet. But the problem with Shamil Gaziev is his cardio is not that good, and his striking defense is pretty bad as well. But the thing with Shamil Gaziev is he is always going to be moving forward. He's always going to be pressuring forward on the feet. And this guy hits like a truck. He has power like none other. He can get some massive KOs. He knocks down his opponent, Greg Velasco, in like the first 20 seconds of the fight, and then worked for a submission in that fight there. Now, if he was a little bit more patient, he probably could have finished the fight off a little bit earlier with strikes, but he showed off pretty solid grappling to get the rear naked choke. Martin Buday has got himself into the rankings by fighting the lowest ranked UFC heavyweights in the division. He won on the Contender Series, and then he beat Chris Barnett, and then Lucas Bursky, who's not in the UFC anymore, Jake Collier, who I don't think's in the UFC anymore, and then Josh Parisian. His wins are over the lowest ranked guys at heavyweight, so he's done really well to avoid the up-and-coming scary guys like the Tougher Brothers and other guys that just have insane power, because he was fighting, you know, the Chase Shermans of the UFC heavyweight division. But the way that Martin Buday tends to win most of his fights is by using his size, because he's a big guy. He's 6'4". He's pretty big for the weight class as well. He's got quite a bit of weight on him. He does weigh in at 265 pounds at the limit usually. But he wins by controlling his opponents in the clinch for the most part. And that is boring. Let's be honest. That is not very fun. He can get takedowns. He can kind of strike. Lucas Bursky kind of exposed his striking a little bit about a year ago. I'm on Shamil Gaziev here. I'm a little bit confused as to why he's the underdog, because I do believe that although this is his debut, Shamil Gaziev has proven himself to be the real deal. I think Gaziev wins by finish in this fight here. I think he can knock out Martin Buday in the first round, but he's got to be careful, man, because he is hittable, and his cardio is not good. But Martin Buday's cardio is terrible as well, so maybe that bad cardio is going to even it out. If Shamil Gaziev wins inside the distance, it's probably going to be early. Other than that, it's a typical heavyweight fight. It'll probably go the distance. But I am on Gaziev. I think Gaziev, as the underdog, is going to be able to go out there and get the win. And now we have Andre Fili taking on Lucas Almeida. And in my opinion, I think this fight just comes down to whether or not Andre Fili wrestles, because sometimes he wrestles and sometimes he doesn't. The thing with Andre Fili is, if he wrestles, he gets like 4 or 5 takedowns a fight. He beat Artem Lobov a few years ago by getting 5 takedowns in that matchup. And sometimes he just doesn't go for takedowns at all and decides to fight it out on the feet. The smart way to beat Lucas Almeida, if I was Andre Fili, would be to wrestle. And that's what he should do in this fight, because Lucas Almeida, he got pretty badly exposed against Pat Sabatini as a guy that doesn't have good takedown defense and just doesn't really have anything off his back. Now, Lucas Almeida is an incredibly dangerous striker who's always moving forward, who's always pressuring forward, can knock you out at any time. But Andre Fili's going to have a massive grappling advantage over him, and if Andre Fili does choose to go out there and just use that aspect of MMA that he's got a massive advantage in, he should be able to dominate the fight. I know that Andre Fili isn't going to be as good of a wrestler as Pat Sabatini is, but at the end of the day, I think that it should be good enough to beat Lucas Almeida. He should be able to get Lucas Almeida down. He should be able to out-grapple Lucas Almeida. If he can stay on top, work for the back, he could probably potentially find a finish by submission or something like that. But I'm going to go with Andre Fili in a fight that could genuinely go either way, because if Andre Fili decides to strike with Almeida, he's going to be in a bit of trouble as Almeida hits hard. He moves forward. He's got power. But I'm going to choose Andre Fili to go with a smart game plan and wrestle against Lucas Almeida. That's what it comes down to for me personally. I'm going to go with Andre Fili by decision in this matchup. Maybe, potentially, a submission. And now we have Tagir Ulanbekov taking on Cody Durden. And I'm going to go with another underdog here. I think that Cody Durden beats Tagir Ulanbekov. Tagir Ulanbekov, he is in Khabib's camp, but he's the guy that's in the camp that's kind of like the runt of the litter, you know. He's the one that isn't as impressive as all of the other ones. Now, yes, he did dominate Nate Menes with a first round standing finish, which was a great win. But prior to that, he lost to Tim Elliott in a fight which he was outstruck and out-wrestled in 2 of the rounds. Now, yes, he dominated the 3rd round and looks really good, but Tim Elliott was pretty tired at that point, and Elliott had already banked the first 2 rounds anyway. He had a win against Alan Nascimento, which has aged incredibly well. But if they did a rematch right now, I would be pretty confident in Nascimento. And then he beat Bruno Silva. But the point about Tagir Ulanbekov is his striking doesn't impress me much at all. And his wrestling is good. But I don't think it's going to be good enough to go out there and out-wrestle Cody Durden. Because Cody Durden is a beast, man. This guy can go out there and get 10 takedowns on a night. He has crazy cardio. He'll keep going forward. His striking does leave quite a bit to be desired, but his wrestling's solid, and this guy has been making rapid improvements in his game. He's on a big win streak, knocked out Bays, beat Carlos Mota, who then failed a USADA test, then beat Charles Johnson by a lot of wrestling, and then he just beat Jake Hadley in a very impressive performance in a fight which a lot of people were picking Jake Hadley to win. I think Cody Durden goes out there and can out-wrestle Tagir Ulanbekov. I think if Cody Durden goes out there and initiates the wrestling and grappling sequences, he will have a lot of success, because Tagir Ulanbekov is a guy, which we saw against Tim Elliott, isn't that great at defensive wrestling. If you initiate the fights and get Tagir Ulanbekov on his back, he is obviously not as good as when he's the one dictating the pace and moving forward. So I'm going to be picking Cody Durden to win by decision in this one here. I think it might look similar to the matchup against Tim Elliott, except Cody Durden is going to have the cardio to last all 3 rounds and take down Tagir Ulanbekov by decision. 2 rounds to 1, maybe even all 3 rounds go Durden's way. I think Durden is able to go out there and get it done. Now we have Alonzo Menifield taking on Dustin Jacoby. I do like Dustin Jacoby in this matchup here, and the odds do kind of reflect that. At the end of the day, Dustin Jacoby is just the better striker. Now, Alonzo Menifield, he's powerful, he can wrestle if he wants to, and he's a pretty big guy. Like, I know he is 6 foot, but this guy is a beast. He is built, and he's quite big for the weight class, although he is going to be a bit shorter than Dustin Jacoby and a lot of light heavyweights. At the end of the day, Jacoby is going to have a slight reach advantage with his kicks. I guess if that makes any sense. I know they've got the same reach, but Jacoby's a bit taller. He throws a lot of kicks. He throws a lot of leg kicks. He's got that glory kickboxing experience. He's a solid striker. He's beaten good guys. He's coming off some pretty tough losses. That loss to Kelleher Roundtree. A lot of people think that Jacoby should have won that one. And then the loss to Azamat Mirzakhanov. That was a weird loss because he kind of got beaten in his own game. And then when he had the opportunity to win the fight, he kind of clinched and went for a takedown. So that was odd. Anyway, but he come back, knocked out Kennedy and Jikbuku, and now he's back on that train. And I do believe he's going to turn away Alonzo Menifield, who's trying to work his way up the rankings at this point. Alonzo Menifield, he is really powerful in round 1, but Alonzo Menifield's cardio has always been a little bit of a problem for him. He's not going to be as technical as Dustin Jacoby on the feet. He probably will be the better wrestler, and if he wants to, he could go for takedowns, but Jacoby has shown good takedown defense in the past. I like Jacoby to keep this fight at range, to work the legs, to throw straight punches, and just kind of survive the first rounds. Even if he loses the first round, that'll be fine, because Jacoby can go out there and just work on a much more tired Alonzo Menifield in round 2 and 3, and win a decision or a late finish. So I'm going to go with Jacoby by decision, or maybe like a round 3 TKO, maybe round 2 TKO. The fight is in front of a crowd, and they tend to have a little bit more finishes. They tend to be a little bit better when they are in front of a crowd, of course. Now we have Casey O'Neill taking on Ariane Lipski. I want to see Casey O'Neill go out there and go back to the wrestling and go back to the grappling. I think that is where she would have the majority of her success, because in the past, when Casey O'Neill was making her UFC debut, takedowns against Shanna Jobson, takedowns against Lara Fritzen, takedowns against Antonia Shevchenko, and then she beat Roxanne Modafferi in a purely striking fight where she threw a lot of volume. And then out there against Jennifer Maia, I believe she only attempted 1 takedown in a fight which she was losing on the feet. So a little bit concerned there, maybe a little bit of a fight IQ issue to be worried about in the future. But if there ever was a fight for Casey O'Neill to go out there and go back into the well of her wrestling, of her grappling, it will be this one here, because Ariane Lipski is a really good kickboxer who does have good Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu when she's on her back, but she can get taken down, and it would be wise for Casey O'Neill to take her down, especially because Ariane Lipski is a kickboxer. She throws a lot of kicks. She fights from range very well. She had a good fight against Melissa Gatto, and she also had a pretty decent win over JJ Aldrich, who seemingly has fallen off a little bit, but JJ Aldrich is always a tough win to have. I think this is a bounce back fight for Casey O'Neill. She suffered her first loss to Jennifer Maia. If she goes out there and wrestles, she should be able to dominate this fight. If she stands and strikes, she's going to have to rely on her boxing a bit. But even then, in a pure striking fight, O'Neill could take it as well. But I think that the big X factor that Casey O'Neill has in this matchup is the ability to offensively wrestle and offensively grapple. And that's what I want to see in this fight. I want to see her go out there and offensively wrestle and grapple against Ariane Lipski, dominate in top control, use that ground and pound, which we have seen in the past, and win a decision or ground and pound TKO. But I like O'Neill in this matchup. I think that she should be able to get it done. And now we move on to a good fight. A fight that makes a lot of sense. This fight was actually made by the UFC's newest matchmaker. You know, that competition that they did where you could make a big card. The winner ended up getting a job at the UFC as a matchmaker. And this is the first fight that he made. And this is a good one. So, I think his name's Joe. Joe cooked on this one. This is a good fight. It's a good fight for Cody Garbrandt. And I think it's a good fight for Brian Kelleher as well. The only reason why I'm a little bit sad is because I do like Brian Kelleher. Brian Kelleher, way back in the day, was a fighter that I was a fan of. I understand that he's always been a bit of a veteran. He's always been a bit of an underdog, but he does have a pretty fun story. He was on UFC's Looking for a Fight, I believe, when he beat Julio Arce. And then he went out there as a massive underdog in 2017 and won by guillotine in the first round. I started personally really paying a lot of attention to him in 2020 when he knocked out Hunter Azier. But since then, it's kind of been a bit of up and down, and maybe he's fighting for his career here. Personally, I think that would be a little bit rough, because he took on Umar Nurmagomedov on short notice, and then Mario Batista back-to-back 3 months away from each other. So that's pretty rough matchmaking for a guy like Brian Kelleher, taking on now a former champion and still a pretty big name in the sport, a guy that I like, a guy that actually was the first fighter that I was a massive fan of, Cody Garbrandt. I want to say it was like late 2016 was when I really started getting into MMA. Like, I would have only been like 14 years old then, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, when he knocked out Thomas Almeida in the middle of 2016, and then to Kaya Mizugati, and then fought for the title, that was when I really started paying attention to MMA. And Cody Garbrandt was like my guy. And then he went on a big losing streak, and I feel a little bit sad now about it. But I think he should be able to turn back the clock and beat Brian Kelleher in a similar way that he beat Trevin Jones. Was it Trevin Jones? Yeah. He showed that he can still box, and he showed that he can offensively wrestle. And if he puts it all together against Brian Kelleher, he should be able to win. The way that Kelleher wins fights these days is by offensively wrestling and kind of stalling in top position. I don't think Cody Garbrandt is going to allow that to happen. I think Cody Garbrandt keeps this fight on the feet, outboxes Brian Kelleher for 3 rounds, and potentially finds a finish by knockout in round number 2 or 3. Kelleher's a tough guy, and he's going to be really hard to get out of there, though, because Kelleher is going to be in there in a big matchup. But I do believe, though, that Garbrandt, you know, I think he can still just find that power that he once had. I think he can still show off that boxing that he still has and beat Brian Kelleher. Now, it is worth noting, though, that Cody Garbrandt's chin is something to worry about. He's been knocked out. He's been finished quite a few times recently. But I think he's still got it in him to defeat Brian Kelleher. So give me Cody Garbrandt to win this matchup here. And now we can move on to one of the featured prelims. Irene Aldana taking on Karol Rosa. Man, I'm going to be honest. Irene Aldana really disappointed in her fight against Amanda Nunes. She did not show up. She did not show up at all. She didn't really throw any volume whatsoever. She just didn't go after her at all. At all. Amanda Nunes, it was kind of a showcase performance for her, and it almost looked like Irene Aldana was scared to get into a firefight with someone as powerful and as talented as Amanda Nunes. But at the end of the day, Irene Aldana still has slick boxing. She's still a fantastic striker. She still can beat Karol Rosa, in my opinion. Karol Rosa, I don't rate Karol Rosa that highly. I did pick her to win her last fight against Yana Santos, but even then, like, there's just something about Karol Rosa that I can't really explain. I just don't think she can beat Irene Aldana. I don't think she can take Irene Aldana down, and I don't think that she can outstrike Irene Aldana either, because at the end of the day, the way that Irene Aldana wins is using her boxing, because her boxing at 135, women's 135, is very good. She didn't show it off against Amanda Nunes whatsoever, but Karol Rosa, compared to Amanda Nunes, is a massive step down in competition, and I think that she should be able to go out there and take out Karol Rosa and win this matchup. So I'm going to go with Irene Aldana to win by decision in what I think should be a pretty entertaining fight. Karol Rosa is going to try and make it boring by clinching up against the cage, by trying to get takedowns, but Aldana should be strong enough to thwart that off. She's going to be a little bit bigger as well, or at least she's going to be taller, but I think she should still have the size, even though Rosa has been fighting at 145 recently. I think that's just because she just hasn't really been wanting to cut weight. If you watch those fights, you'll kind of understand what I mean. But let's move on to the next one. Josh Emmett taking on Bryce Mitchell on short notice. And this, man, is a fight that I find pretty hard to pick, because I really think that Josh Emmett can win this one here. And this is going to be incredibly unpopular as a pick, but I am going to pick Josh Emmett to win this one. Now, I have always been a guy that's been very skeptical of Josh Emmett. I've always been saying that Josh Emmett's power is overrated, because it is. Everyone talks about Josh Emmett's power. This man hasn't knocked anyone out since 2019, and that was Mirsad Bektic. You know, like, he doesn't have the power to knock out the top guys. But Bryce Mitchell might be someone that he could do it to, because Bryce Mitchell's striking is good, but it leaves a lot to be desired. Now, it is worth noting, though, Bryce Mitchell's game isn't striking. Bryce Mitchell's game is grappling for sure, and his wrestling is pretty good as well. But I think that Josh Emmett's grappling, should be good enough. He should be good enough to keep this fight on the feet. And yes, I know he's almost 39 years old, but look at the guys he just lost to. Yair Rodriguez. And yes, he got dominated by Ilia Topuria. But a lot of people are picking Ilia Topuria to beat Alexander Volkanovski. So, you know, Ilia Topuria, in a lot of people's eyes, is the potential champion at featherweight. And now he's taking on Bryce Mitchell, who is a fantastic grappler. He really is a really good grappler. But I think that if he can't get this fight down to the ground, which I think he is going to struggle to do, I think he can win this fight. And he's taking it on short notice as well. The cardio could be a little bit of an issue. Bryce Mitchell's, if you've been kind of paying a lot of attention, maybe he sorted it now, but 2 months ago when he took on Dan Ige, his personal life was an absolute mess. But I'm not going to go into that. That's not my deal at all. But he's going through things in his personal life as well, or at least he was a couple of months ago. So maybe he's trying to get this money to buy more fruit trees. You know what I mean. If you know, you know. But I think that Josh Emmett can defend the takedowns, and I think he can keep the fight on the feet. He is going to be the better striker than Bryce Mitchell. Yes, he is old. Yes, he is washed. Let's be honest, he is a bit washed. But I just, very low confidence pick. I think Emmett wins. I think Emmett beats him. I think he can take him out. I mean, he beat Calvin Kattar, apparently, allegedly. He didn't really, but anyway, a year and a half ago. I think Calvin Kattar would be able to beat Bryce Mitchell. This isn't even a full camp for Mitchell either. It's going to be a different stylistic matchup for Emmett, but I think he keeps it on the feet, and I think he can beat Bryce Mitchell. Do I think he can knock him out? I'm going to say no, because he hasn't knocked anyone out in a very long time, but I'm going to still pick Emmett, and let's move on. A little bit of a controversial pick here. And now we can move on. Okay, this one's actually quite a bit to talk about, isn't it? Because we've got Vicente Luque taking on Garry. And it's a little bit of a message to Garry. This is what I guarantee happens. I'm picking Garry to win. I'll get that out of the way so I can say this. Garry is going to win. And then he's going to get on the mic and he's going to say, there were a lot of people doubting me in this fight, but it's just more people to prove wrong, and I proved them all wrong. No one is doubting your fighting ability Garry. You're 13-0. You're very talented. We all recognize that you're 13-0 and that you're very talented. What we are doubting is the potential stability going on in your life. That's what people are doubting. Now, I'm not going to get into that too much, but what I will say is, Garry, man, I think he's got the wrong idea with what's happening right now with Sean Strickland and all these other people that have been calling him out for all of these things. We're not doubting your skill set on the feet. The doubt is not even to do with fighting really whatsoever. It's just kind of to do with the intentions of someone that's very important in your life. So I'm waiting for Garry to go out there and get on the mic and just have the complete wrong idea with what's kind of going on with the situation that he's in. But to be fair, it is an unfortunate situation that he is in, but he did kind of put himself there because he did do the Jeff Neal situation with the mugshot. He did call out Neil Magny and say all these things about Neil Magny that obviously aren't true, and now Neil Magny's had to deal with a lot of repercussions that have actually stemmed from him doing that. So I feel like he's done a lot of actions and not really understood the consequences of what he's done, because at the moment Neil Magny, I believe, is fighting in the court to maintain custody of his children with his partner due to the things that Garry has said about him. So, I think there was a lot of talk, but not a lot of thought about like the consequences of his actions. And now all of these things that he's done has really caught up to him, because what he did was he made himself an unlikable character, and now all of a sudden people have a reason to go after him. And boy, they have dug up some pretty dirty stuff that has gone on in his life. But I'm not going to get into that too much. Let's talk about the fight. I think Garry wins. I did say that before I started kind of ranting on about Garry's mentality, which isn't going to be good. I think the press conference could be crazy if Colby Covington decides to take Sean Strickland's side. But stylistically, I think he beats Vicente Luque, because it's something to note about Vicente Luque, and this is actually kind of a big reason why I picked him to lose against Rafael dos Anjos. Vicente Luque had a brain injury. I don't exactly know what it was, but he had a brain injury prior to his fight against Rafael dos Anjos, and was hospitalized for it, was treated for it, and now he's fighting still. I don't know, man. I see Vicente Luque get hit after that situation happened to him, and I just kind of cringe a little bit. And Vicente Luque's chin has always been really good. But it does come a time where you've been hit a little bit too many times, you get knocked out, you have a brain injury. That just doesn't happen anymore. I think Garry can knock him out. I don't want him to knock him out, but I think he's going to. But the way that Luque could win this fight, and the most likely way for him to win this fight, is to become the Dark Knight. Because if Luque goes out there and wrestles and grapples, we don't actually know how good Garry's wrestling and grappling truly is, because we haven't had to see him fight against someone that's trying to constantly take him down. Neil Magny didn't really do it. Daniel Rodriguez definitely didn't do it. Song Kanan definitely didn't do it. Gabe Green just clinched against him on the cage, I guess. And so did Darian Weeks. Kind of both guys did. They weren't very good performances from Garry. But one thing I will say about him is he is rapidly improving. But Luque, he's the Dark Knight. He Dark choked Michael Chiesa, who's a very good grappler. He Dark choked Tyron Woodley, who's a pretty solid wrestler, former champion at that time as well. Dark choked Nico Price, who at that time was 10-0, was a solid fighter, and he also, he Dark choked so many people. He's the Dark Knight. If he brings the Dark Knight out and tries to submit Garry, tries to grapple Garry, we've never seen Garry's grappling in a UFC fight. Now, I know it's good, and he has been to Brazil to work on his grappling, so you know it's good. But is it good enough to deal with Luque's grappling? Because Luque's a really good grappler. If Luque goes out here with the game plan to take him down, to get him on the ground, things could get interesting. I'm picking Garry. I'm picking Garry by knockout. I wish I wasn't, but I am. And now, let's move on to the next one, which is Tony Ferguson versus Paddy Pimblett. I didn't prepare a speech for this, but I am picking Tony Ferguson. I am picking Tony Ferguson. He doesn't have it anymore. Tony Ferguson is the definition of a washed fighter at the moment, but I still think he's good enough to beat Paddy Pimblett, because there's so many things that Paddy Pimblett does that is wrong, and he has stated, and his coach has stated, Paddy Pimblett does not want to fix these things. Paddy Pimblett, when he fights, he kind of does, but he doesn't really move his head, and his chin is up in the air. When you go and you do a little bit of training and boxing and stuff like that, the first thing they really tell you to do is make sure that your chin is tucked. You've got to kind of fight with a tucked chin, so your chin's not up in the air, and so you don't get slapped around and knocked out. You can get your jaw broken as well, fighting with your mouth hanging open, with your chin up in the air. Pimblett does that, and he has stated, it's not something that he wants to fix, it's something that he wants to do, which means that he is very hittable, and this was mostly exposed in that Jared Gordon fight, which a lot of people believe that Paddy Pimblett didn't win. I don't think Paddy Pimblett won that fight either. It was a close fight, Pimblett didn't win that fight though. Tony Ferguson, he does have a lot of losses recently. He's on a big losing streak, and it's really hard to watch because I am a big fan of Tony Ferguson. The Bobby Green loss can be excused. The Nate Diaz loss cannot be excused. But all of these other losses can be excused. At the end of the day, he was fighting the best of the best. He was fighting the guys that are currently in the top 5 right now. Maybe Dariush has dropped out, but Oliveira, champion, Gaethje, BMF champion, interim champion, obviously at the time. Michael Chandler fought for the belt against Oliveira. But Neil Dariush has always been a top contender. Nate Diaz, unexcusable loss. The worst performance I have ever seen out of Tony Ferguson, which will be why he probably went down to 155 again. And against Bobby Green, in the first round, don't get me wrong, did he have success? Because he did. Tony Ferguson was having success on the feet against Bobby Green, but then Bobby Green poked him in the eye. And I'm not going to say anything, but Bobby Green, when things tend to not be going his way, that does kind of tend to happen. He poked Tony Ferguson in the eye, he headbutted Jared Gordon, and he's done other things as well to other fighters. He did that to Tony Ferguson, and the fight just switched like that. All of a sudden, Tony Ferguson wasn't the same guy, and he looked even worse than he ever has before. But the thing about Tony Ferguson that I cannot watch, and it hurts me to watch, is when people are throwing strikes against him, he's crumbling, he's fading, he's not just kind of eating them on the chin, he's not just kind of blocking them and, like, you know, seeing them as they come. When he sees them come, he kind of like washes away, he steps back, he doesn't want to take shots anymore. Nobody likes getting hit in the face. That's a fact. Nobody likes getting hit in the face. But Tony Ferguson really doesn't want to get hit in the face at this point in his career, and I hate seeing that. But the thing is, I don't think Paddy Pimblett, as a striker, is actually going to be a good enough striker to overpower Tony Ferguson and that kind of thing. And when Tony Ferguson is on his game, we saw it in the first round against Michael Chandler. He dropped Michael Chandler. He looked good. He had success. He won that first round. Then he got KO'd. But anyway, against Nate Diaz, he looked terrible. Against Bobby Green, in that first round, or at least the first half of that round, he's having success. He's looking good. I think he can do it, man. If this fight is a purely striking fight, Tony Ferguson will be good to go. We know that his cardio is going to be better than Paddy Pimblett. Tony Ferguson has always had the most insane cardio we've ever seen. He just did that crazy training with that crazy dude that runs for a long time. We know that he's going to have good cardio. We know that he's going to be ready for this fight. If Tony Ferguson goes in there, has a good weight cut, looks good, he can beat Paddy Pimblett. The way that Paddy Pimblett wins, he's going to have to probably finish Tony Ferguson. Most likely could do it on the ground with his grappling, because that's what he is. He is a grappler. He's not really a striker. He does have power. But Tony Ferguson, at this point in his career, I know he's slow. I know he's got nothing left. Come on, Tony. I know he can do it. I am picking him to do it. Very low confidence pick. These odds are disrespectful, man. I don't see Paddy Pimblett being a minus 360 favorite in any eyes. Ferguson's going to do it, man. Paddy Pimblett leaves his chin up in the air. His striking defense is terrible. His striking is okay. Ferguson still got it. Come on, man. All these new fans, you don't know how good Tony Ferguson can be and how good he was. It's so sad because, man, Tony Ferguson was so good back in the day. Now we can move on to the massive fights on the card. We've got the featured fight, Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Stephen Thompson, taking place before the co-main and the main events, which are both title fights. This is a good fight, but I'm going to go with Shavkat Rakhmonov here. He is a massive favorite, minus 550. To be honest, a little bit disrespectful to Stephen Thompson, because if this fight plays 15 minutes on the feet, there's a real chance that Stephen Thompson could take this fight. But I do believe that the way that Shavkat can win, and he will win, is by mixing up his elite striking with his elite wrestling and grappling, because that's what makes Shavkat so great. What makes Shavkat so great isn't the fact that he's elite in one area, it's the fact that he's really good everywhere, and he can mix it up. And I think that if he wants to beat Stephen Thompson and really make a statement, I think he's going to have to mix up that striking with the wrestling and the grappling. So my pick is Shavkat Rakhmonov to get a submission. But Stephen Thompson is, he's low-key beating Father Time right now. He is almost 41 years old. And you compare him to every other 40-year-old that there is on the roster, and Stephen Thompson looks a lot better than all of them. And not only that, he had a kickboxing career before even transitioning over to MMA. So he spent his whole year competing in martial arts, and he still looks fantastic. He's still fighting at the top. He's a top 10 welterweight. Has been for an incredibly long time. But now he takes on Shavkat. As I said though, in a pure striking matchup for 15 minutes, I think this would be really competitive. In fact, there's a real chance that Stephen Thompson might have been able to pull off an upset, but I do believe the fact that Shavkat mixes in his great striking with his grappling, with his wrestling, is how he's ultimately going to defeat Stephen Thompson. Now, Stephen Thompson has incredible takedown defense, always has, but we have seen him controlled and taken down by Belal Muhammad, and Gilbert Burns was able to do it as well. The difference is Shavkat is a better striker than Belal and Gilbert Burns, and I think he's going to be able to mix up the striking with the grappling. It is worth noting, though, that Shavkat, I thought, looked really human against Jeff Neal. I thought Jeff Neal had a pretty good performance against Shavkat, gave Shavkat quite a bit of problems as well, and definitely did, as I said, make Shavkat look human, because before that, he dominated Magny, Harris, he beat Mikhail Prazeres, and Alex Oliveira. Now he's going to be taking on the top of the top. Stephen Thompson is one of those guys. Shout out to Stephen Thompson. He's definitely still one of the best fighters in the welterweight division, but Shavkat Rakhmonov is that good, and I think that his grappling advantage is going to be far too much, and the ability on the feet combined with the wrestling, I think they should be able to get it done by submission. I'm going to say second round submission for Shavkat. If he can get a round 1 finish, forget everyone else, it's time for a title shot for Shavkat. I mean, that would be insane if he could pull that off. Now we've got the co-main event. It is a rematch. Alejandro Pantoja taking on Brandon Royval. And this is the fight to make. When this fight was announced, I did actually make an individual video on it. And I'm glad this is happening. And the reason why I'm glad that this is happening is because I think that it wouldn't make that much sense for Brandon Moreno to get another shot at the title. Because Brandon Moreno, his last, I want to say like 5 fights, have all been, his last 6 fights have all been title fights. He fought Figueiredo on short notice for the belt, and then he fought him again, and then he fought him again, and then he fought Kai Kara France for the interim title, and then Figueiredo, and then Pantoja. I think giving Brandon Moreno a 7th title fight in a row wouldn't make that much sense at the moment, because there are other contenders at this weight class. There is Amir Albazi, who is going to be fighting against Brandon Moreno, of course, at the start of next year. And there is up-and-coming guys, you know, there are guys that are going to be knocking at the door very, very soon. So I'm glad that we didn't see it again. And another reason as well is just because he has lost to Pantoja 3 times now. Pantoja beat him in 2018, he beat him in 2016, and then of course he did beat him in 2023. So I think doing a 4th fight between the two wouldn't make sense now, but if Moreno beats Amir Albazi, then you can do a 4th fight, and you probably can sell a 4th fight if Moreno gets past Albazi. But as for Pantoja, I do believe he can get past Royval. Now, the first fight that they had was incredible, and it was more competitive than I do remember it being. I remember Brandon Royval having surprising amount of success in the grappling against Pantoja, because Pantoja is an elite grappler, but more importantly than that, he's just well-rounded. He's a good wrestler, he's a solid striker, he can get it done everywhere. We did see that in his fight against Brandon Moreno, where I did pick Pantoja to win that fight. I was actually quite confident Pantoja was going to win that fight going into it. And when the fight finished, I actually don't know how you can give 3 rounds to Brandon Moreno, because you can't. You just can't. I thought when the fight finished, it was 4-1 Pantoja. I then immediately watched that fight back, because I thought maybe I had a bit of bias. I think it's 3-1 Pantoja clearly. So Pantoja beat Moreno, he won the belt. Now he's taking on a dangerous guy that he has already beaten, to be fair, in Brandon Royval. But Royval has earned it. He's on a 3-fight win streak, beat Bontarine, who was ranked at the time, beat Matt Schnell, who was very highly ranked at the time, and then beat Nicolau, who was knocking on the door of a title shot himself, stole that opportunity from Nicolau, finished him by knockout as well, even more impressively. But he has lost to Pantoja in the past. And Pantoja did win by submission in that fight, but it was fun. It was competitive, and this fight is going to be fun, and it's going to be competitive, but this fight is not going the distance. Absolutely no way. Pantoja is a finisher, and so is Royval. Pantoja is an elite grappler. That's how he started out his career, was just with absolutely insane Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu accolades. I believe he's a former national Jiu-Jitsu champ. I want to say he's a former world champion at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but I'm not too sure about that. I know he's got crazy Jiu-Jitsu accolades, but that striking has improved as well. And he is super aggressive on the feet. And he is a super fun fighter to watch. But so is Brandon Royval. And you could say that Brandon Royval is more aggressive and more exciting to watch than Pantoja. So you're putting two guys together that have fantastic fights time and time and time again. Guys that finish fights time and time and time again. This is going to be an absolute war for the 3 rounds that it lasts. This ain't going to round 4 or 5. This is going to be a fight that isn't going to last long because both of these guys have aggressive, fun fighting styles. Both of these guys have knockout power at this weight class. Both guys have submission ability at this weight class, and they're both aggressive. They're both all offense. They're both all gas, no breaks. These guys are going to come and collide. We're going to see some great grappling scrambles. We're going to see some combinations from both guys. We're going to see some big shots landed on both sides, but I am ultimately picking Pantoja to get past the absolute tornado that is going to be Brandon Royval, especially in round 1 and 2. I think he's going to meet the fire with his own fire, and we are going to have a banger of a fight. But I think Pantoja gets it done. He won the last fight. That's obviously not the only reason why I am picking him to win the fight, but I think he can get it done. I think he can get past Brandon Royval, and I think he can use his grappling and his striking to his advantage here. I think he can get past the aggressiveness that is Royval, because Royval does leave himself very open when he does go for things. And I think it's going to be a competitive fight until Pantoja lands something or just gets a really good submission attempt at round 2 or 3 and gets the finish. Let me pick Alejandro Pantoja. This is a fight you should be excited for. I think it's going to go under the radar because when people think of flyweight, they think of Brandon Moreno. They love Brandon Moreno. Pantoja didn't have the most exciting fight when he beat Brandon Moreno, but I'm telling you, Alejandro Pantoja is one of the most exciting fighters on the roster. I'm so happy he's a champion, and I'm happy that he's fighting Royval because this is going to be an insane fight and absolutely a fight that you should be looking out for because it's going to be a lot of fun. But now we've got Leon Edwards taking on Colby Covington in the main event. This is a big fight, and it's a big fight for Leon Edwards and his legacy because, in my opinion, in the rankings, this is Leon Edwards' hardest stylistic matchup. Leon Edwards will not fight a guy stylistically more difficult than Colby Covington after this matchup. Now, yes, you could say, oh, I think Shavkat Rakhmonov beats him. Oh, I think so-and-so beats him. Stylistically, Shavkat Rakhmonov is a better matchup for him than Colby Covington is. And the reason why I will say that is it is stylistically a bad matchup. The reason why is Colby Covington is a wrestler. Yes, Kamaru Usman is a wrestler, but he's a wrestler that is not going to stop going for takedowns, and he has elite cardio, and he just keeps going and going and going with the takedown attempts, because we saw when he took on Kamaru Usman in the second fight where he did win that decision there, Kamaru Usman was attempting takedowns, he was trying to get the takedowns, but Leon Edwards just showed his elite takedown defense. But the volume that Kamaru Usman was shooting those takedowns is nowhere near the volume of takedowns that Colby Covington is going to be shooting, because he is a wrestler that will chain wrestle, and once he gets attached to you, he's going to keep going for that takedown, and when you are having to defend that takedown, Covington is going to be tiring Leon Edwards out. It is going to be incredibly hard work for Leon Edwards to have to be constantly defending takedowns against Colby Covington. Covington's going to be putting him in very uncomfortable positions up against the cage and is constantly shooting. We saw it against Jorge Masvidal, where Masvidal was defending the takedowns, but once he defended one takedown, all of a sudden, Colby Covington was back with another one. And I think it's going to be like that for Leon Edwards, but the difference is, I think Leon Edwards has it, man. I'm high on Leon Edwards. I picked Leon Edwards to beat Kamaru Usman in the second fight, and then I picked him to beat him in the third fight as well. I think Leon Edwards is the real deal. I think he can keep Colby Covington at bay on the feet. I think he can use his reach. I think he can use his size. I think he can use his length to outstrike Colby Covington from distance and win a decision, or potentially even find a knockout, because at the end of the day, although Colby Covington's striking is really good and probably is underrated by a lot of people, he did have competitive fights on the feet with Usman, and he did have a competitive fight on the feet when the fight was on the feet for not very long, kind of, with Masvidal. Yes, Masvidal dropped him, but he's still a solid striker. Covington is still a good striker, but he's just so good at wrestling, he's got no reason to strike with these guys. I think Colby Covington is going to be shooting from the start all the way to the end. But I think Leon Edwards is that good, man. And Leon Edwards' grappling is really good. He could get on top of Colby Covington and maybe try and just kind of stay safe on top of Colby, because a lot of the time when these dominant wrestlers get put on their back, they're not as good as when they are on top. Obviously, it's kind of the same with everyone, but you do see that sometimes. Do I think that's really going to happen? No. I think Leon Edwards wants this fight on the feet, and I think he keeps this fight on the feet. I think he's an elite enough striker to keep Colby Covington at the end of his shots, to keep him at bay, and just to keep him far away enough where Leon Edwards can use that movement to get out of the way of the Colby Covington takedown attempts. One thing that I will add as well is Colby Covington, he's not young anymore. He's almost 36 years old. He hasn't fought for a year and 9 months. All he's really done is just sit out and wait for this title shot to fall in his lap. Leon Edwards didn't want to fight Colby Covington, which kind of makes sense. But the way that Leon Edwards did it, it kind of looked like he was ducking him, I'll be honest, instead of just saying he hasn't earned it. This guy hasn't fought for ages. His last win is over Masvidal. Whatever. The way that Leon Edwards kind of didn't want to fight Colby Covington, or said that he didn't want to, kind of looked like he was ducking him. But another thing that I'll say as well is Colby is not big for this weight class at all. He is a guy that probably could make 155. Maybe not now at the age of 36 at this point in his career, but a few years ago, he probably could have been a lightweight, but he just doesn't really cut that much weight, which probably isn't that bad though, because that means that he doesn't cut a lot of weight, which doesn't really drain his cardio so much, because Colby Covington is an absolute cardio machine. Edwards has good cardio though too. He went 5 rounds with Usman, and he knocked out Usman in the 5th round at elevation, so not too bad for Edwards. Edwards has the cardio as well. Colby Covington, though, another thing as well is, yes, he's had competitive fights with Kamaru Usman in the past, but you've got to look at his career, and you look at the wins. Who has Colby Covington beaten? He's beaten Masvidal. That's probably his best win. I mean, he did beat Tyron Woodley. He did beat Robbie Lawler, but these guys were old, man, and washed up at this point. He beat RDA, but RDA is a good win, to be fair, but he was old. Damian Maia was old. You know, aside from that, like, he's just beaten a lot of old guys, man. Leon Edwards is, I know he's sat out for ages with an injury and just sort of like COVID and lots of different things kind of messed him up. Edwards, I think Edwards beats him, man. I think Edwards beats him on the feet. I think there's a chance that he can get a knockout, most likely a decision. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Are you as excited for this card as I am? Because I'm hyped. I cannot wait for this card. I'm so excited. The problem is with this card is it's the day before a massive exam that I've got for summer school. So I've got to really get a lot of study done before this card. But let me know what you think in the comments below. And I'll see you guys in my next video.